Friends, do you ever feel like your trading is full of problems? Sometimes you miss out on great trades. Sometimes you ignore your stop loss. Sometimes you book profits too early. And sometimes, even with the perfect setup, you hesitate to pull the trigger. If that sounds familiar, maybe the real issue isn't any of these mistakes. Maybe all of them are just symptoms of one old pattern that keeps repeating itself. And until you recognize that pattern, you'll keep trying to fix each problem one by one, but your results won't really change. Friends, welcome to the Daily Trading Coach web series. I'm Priya Pant, and today we're diving into lesson 36. It's called Disrupt Old Problem Patterns, which simply means breaking free from the old cycles that hold you back. Dr. Steenbarger makes a fascinating point. Most traders don't really have 10 different problems. They usually have one old problem that simply shows up in 10 different ways. Let's take an example. Imagine a trader who keeps saying, I miss good trades again and again. I can't stick to my stop loss. I keep my position size too small, and I cut winning trades too early. At first glance, those look like 4 separate issues, but if you dig a little deeper, you might find they all come from the same root cause. Maybe it's a lack of confidence, maybe it's fear of losing, or maybe it's the urge to control everything too tightly. This is where most traders go wrong. They try to fix each problem separately. One solution for stop losses, another for entries, another for position sizing, and yet another for trade management. But if the real cause is just one pattern, then all those fixes are nothing more than band-aids. True change begins only when you identify the root cause, the one pattern that keeps creating all those mistakes over and over again. And that's really the core message of this entire lesson. The real transformation begins when we identify the root cause behind our repeated mistakes. To do that, we need to look beneath the surface and understand the patterns driving our behavior. Imagine a trader who constantly struggles with anxiety every time they miss a good trade, or their stop loss gets hit too quickly. A negative self-talk loop begins. I failed again. I can never stay disciplined. Maybe I'll never become a consistent trader. Over time, those thoughts stop being just thoughts. They become a mental state, and that mental state starts influencing every trading decision that follows. At that point, the problem is no longer the entry. It's not the stop loss. The real problem is the mental loop, the anxiety that keeps triggering poor decisions. Dr. Brett calls this the pattern of patterns. It's the underlying pattern that gives rise to many different trading mistakes. And here's the breakthrough. Once a trader identifies that root pattern, multiple problems often begin to improve at the same time. They miss fewer trades. They stick to their stop losses. They size their positions with greater confidence. And they stop cutting winning trades too early. Notice something important. They didn't solve each problem individually. Instead, they worked on the one mental pattern that was creating all those problems in the first place. That's what real self-coaching looks like. And that's where lasting transformation begins. Friends, most traders already know what they shouldn't be doing. They know that revenge trading is harmful. They know that overtrading can damage their account. And they know that breaking their trading plan is dangerous. But the real problem isn't that they don't know what to avoid. The real problem is that when emotions take over, they don't know what to do instead. And that's exactly where most traders get stuck. Dr. Brett explains that every meaningful change happens in 2 stages. First, you interrupt the old problem pattern, and second, you replace it with a new and better one. But here's the important part. The second step comes later. The first priority is to stop causing further damage, because if there's a hole in a ship, it makes no sense to keep bailing out water until the hole is sealed. The same principle applies to trading. If a particular behavior keeps costing you money, the first step is to stop that behavior, even if you don't yet have the perfect solution, because improvement begins when the damage stops. According to Dr. Brett, every destructive pattern is born from a specific mental state. And when you change that mental state, the pattern begins to lose its grip. He shares an interesting example from his own trading. He noticed that his worst trading decisions happened whenever his focus shifted away from the market and onto his P&L. If a trade was losing money, he would hold on to it longer than he should. and if a trade was showing a profit, he would feel tempted to exit too quickly. At that point, his decisions were no longer being driven by the chart. They were being driven by emotions. But as soon as he became aware of it, he would deliberately pull himself out of that mental state. He would take his eyes off the screen, focus on an object nearby, and take 2 or 3 deep breaths. It sounds incredibly simple, but that small pause helped reset his mind. And once that happened, he could look at the market again, not through the lens of emotion, but through the lens of his trading plan. Remember, the first step in breaking any old pattern is catching it while it's happening. If you recognize it after it has already taken control, it's often too late. But if you catch it in the beginning, you can completely change the outcome. So here's a simple exercise. Identify your biggest trading mistake. Then ask yourself, what mental state usually creates this mistake? What emotion triggers it? And the next time that emotion shows up, pause for a moment, just 2 seconds. Take 2 deep breaths, and then make your decision. Because sometimes, those 2 seconds can save you hundreds, or even thousands of dollars. Friends, by now we understand how important it is to recognize and interrupt old patterns. But this brings us to an important question. What do you do when the market is live, emotions are running high, and decisions need to be made in a matter of seconds? How do you stop yourself from slipping back into those old habits? Dr. Brett shares several practical techniques. And the first one is surprisingly simple. Change your state. Whenever you find yourself frustrated after a series of losses, or notice that emotions are starting to influence your decisions, step away from the screen for a few minutes. Take a short walk. Do some light stretching, grab a glass of water, or have a brief conversation with another trader. It may seem like a small thing, but changing your physical state often changes your mental state as well. And when your mental state changes, the way you see and process information changes too. Dr. Brett says that after taking a significant loss, he often goes for a walk. When he returns, he comes back with a completely different mindset. The emotions have settled, his thinking is clearer, and his decisions become far more objective. Another powerful technique he recommends is journaling, or what he calls thinking out loud. In simple terms, take the thoughts in your head and either write them down or say them out loud. Why does this work? Because when thoughts remain trapped inside your mind, you stay emotionally caught up in them. But the moment you put those thoughts into words, something changes. You begin to see them more clearly. Instead of being absorbed by the thought, you become an observer of it. And that small shift in perspective can make a huge difference in the decisions you make next. Imagine a thought like this running through your mind. I have to take this trade right now, or I'll miss the opportunity. When that thought stays inside your head, it feels completely true. But the moment you write it down, or say it out loud, you begin to see it differently. Suddenly you realize, maybe that's not logic talking. Maybe that's just FOMO. Many professional traders use this exact technique. They talk themselves through the market in real time. What's the market doing? What am I thinking? What am I feeling right now? And as they do that, their attention shifts away from emotion and back toward observation. And that's where better decisions begin. At this point, Dr. Brett asks a powerful question, one that could completely change the way you look at your trading. What if you could eliminate your worst 5% of losing trades? How different would your P&L look? Think about that for a moment. What if most of the damage to your account isn't coming from the market at all? What if it's coming from just a handful of emotional trades, revenge trades, overconfidence trades, fear-driven trades, or trades where you ignored your plan? If you could eliminate just those few trades, your entire equity curve might look completely different. And the key to eliminating them is catching them before they take control. The moment you hear yourself saying, I need to make my money back, I can't miss this opportunity, this time I'll trade without a stop loss. Pay attention. That's the signal. That's the moment an old pattern is starting to take over. And that's exactly when you need to pause. That's when you need to step back and coach yourself. Because the biggest difference between successful traders and struggling traders isn't knowledge. It isn't intelligence. It's self-awareness. Dr. Brett shares a personal rule that I find incredibly powerful. He says, whenever I feel frustrated during trading or catch myself reacting emotionally, I treat it as a warning sign. Because frustration isn't just an emotion, it's feedback. It's a signal that an old emotional pattern may be taking control again. Whenever that happens, he slows down his breathing, he takes a step back, and he avoids putting on any new positions until he understands exactly what triggered that frustration. That's the mindset of a professional. Not ignoring emotions, not fighting emotions, but learning from them. Because every emotion has something to teach us, and every pattern leaves clues behind. Friends, if there's one lesson to take away from today's discussion, it's this. Your biggest trading problem may not be the mistake you keep seeing. The real problem is often the pattern that's creating those mistakes. And the moment you learn to recognize that pattern, you begin to take back control. Always remember, success in trading doesn't come from learning something new every single day. Sometimes success is much simpler than that. Sometimes success means you didn't repeat the same old mistake today. And those small victories, day after day, eventually turn into consistency. So the next time an emotion pushes you to act impulsively, don't rush into a trade. Pause, take a breath, observe yourself, listen to your thoughts, and ask yourself, is this my trading plan speaking? Or is this an old pattern trying to take control? Because the goal isn't just to place trades, the goal is to make money. And sometimes, the most profitable trade you'll ever make is the one you choose not to take. If you found value in this lesson, make sure to like and share the video. And if you're following the Daily Trading Coach series, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next lesson, where we'll explore how to replace old problem patterns with new winning patterns. Until then, keep working on your trading. But more importantly, keep working on the trader behind the trades.